We know these ram raids and burglaries are incredibly distressing for small business owners, and that's why we've acted quickly. We've heard the concerns of small businesses being targeted, ram raids and other offending, and we are taking action. This is exactly what the Proceeds of Crime Fund was designed for, to rectify the harm caused by criminal activities. Retail stores and dairies and superettes are the two most common locations for ram raids and other types of crime. Police will now start working with 5 retailers as part of a concept trial for the fund to make sure that the particular needs of each small business are identified and met, ahead of assessments and further retailers who are most at risk. It is expected that an estimated 500 premises will likely qualify. Most will be spread across wider Auckland, but others in Hamilton, Wellington, Christchurch and other centres. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. In some cases, council consent or other approvals will be required before things like physical barriers or bollards are put in place. Police will look at a range of crime and security risks each small retailer may face and then consider the most appropriate options such as fog cannons, security alarms or screens. This will build on the work that the National Retail Investigation Support Unit is already doing in partnership with Retail New Zealand. The unit is working across the country to identify high-priority repeat retail offenders who police will then hold accountable for their actions. They are also working with retail owners to offer advice on smaller things that they can do to make themselves safer, such as keeping windows clear of advertising so people can see inside the store from the street, and having lower shelves so there is a clear line of sight across the store for staff. It's important as Minister of Police that I ensure the police have the investment and resources they need to do their job in protecting our communities. On top of this announcement today, Budget 22 invested a record $562 million in police to enable progress and work on firearms reform, organised crime, police's tactical response model, and a confirmed ratio of police, so we will always have police officers available for our communities. While this fund is the most effective way we can quickly respond to ram raids, this is not a job for police alone. The South Auckland Social Wellbeing Board have stood up a cross-agency team to coordinate local agencies in response to ram raids. The team is co-located in South Auckland and has on-site representatives from Youth Justice, Care and Protection Services, Youth Aid, Bail Support Services, Kāinga Ora, MSD, MOE and from local NGOs. The cross-agency team operates in a similar way to the Family Harm Multidisciplinary Cross-Agency Team, with police referring young people to the team for intervention and support. And as I've said before, we know it takes a whole-of-society approach to address the drivers of this type of crime. Now, did you want to say something? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much, Minister. Retail crime is the number one issue facing our sector today, all retailers being impacted by it. It's always been a problem, but over the last few years it's been getting steadily worse, it's becoming steadily organised and it's becoming increasingly aggressive and violent. And that's creating massive problems for people who work in retail. It's impacting the mental health of workers, it's impacting the well-being of owners and managers of retail stores, particularly in small businesses, but also at the larger end of retail as well. People who work in retail are increasingly living in fear about what they're going to come to at work each day. They're having to clean up the mess arising from the criminal activity that we're seeing. And ultimately, this is costing the country a fortune every year, both in terms of prevention and also in terms of prices, because the costs of crime are ultimately being passed on to consumers through a higher cost of goods. Retail in New Zealand is working very hard on behalf of the whole sector. We've got a lot of resources available to help our members and other retailers work through managing some of the crime issues, and we're really pleased that the government has come to the party with this fund to help small businesses deal with some of the challenges that they've got. And the support of government, the police and everyone in the community is really necessary to help manage the situations that we're seeing, because ultimately managing the specific impacts of crime is all well and good, but it is a wider societal problem, and we're really keen to work with government and others to help address those issues. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. Okay, happy to take questions.
Does this go far enough to actually addressing the issue and what's actually causing the spike in ram rates?
It's a significant announcement that we're making today, but alongside that is the work that the South Auckland Social Wellbeing Board is doing to address why young people are getting into this in the first place.
We've seen a number of businesses lately being hit where bollards haven't been enough to prevent a car getting through.
Well, if you're talking about excavators, yes, that's definitely, a bollard is not going to stop an excavator, but we're seeing crime that is much lower level than that. And to be clear, bollards are not the only solution. So the proof of concept sites are really important to assess a range of measures that could go in place to support.
Minister, on our recent spate of shootings, what's your expectation as far as where that's going?
Could we leave the shootings questions till after this? We want to get through the ram raid matter first, and then I'm really happy to answer questions. I just don't want to hold up these two gentlemen any longer.
We're not just talking about diggers, you're also talking about Ormiston. That's a big complex.
Yeah.
Bollards are going to be a very
So this fund is to support retailers just like Mr. Singh here. We're talking about smaller retailers who may not. Well, that's a different matter. We're talking about vulnerable retailers who may not have the resource to do that.
Vulnerable retailers?
Talking about who may not have the resource to do that. The mall is a different proposition. We're talking about small businesses who've had it tough, particularly during COVID, and we want to do what we can to support them to operate safely.
Just for clarity, is this $6 million in addition to the 600 almost that was announced in the budget?
Absolutely. This has come from the Proceeds of Crime Fund, which is different to the budget announcement.
When does the trial finish? How long will that last?
Well, that's over to you, Matt.
It's proof of concept, these 5 sites, so they'll be started as soon as early as next week. There'll be assessments made on some of those sites. They're across Greater Auckland, from Pukekohe all the way up to here in North and everywhere in between. So those things with the installers will happen in the coming weeks, and then it'll be rolled out essentially from there.
So quite quickly, because people do need it now.
Yeah, pretty quickly, certainly for the first 5 initial stores. At the same time that we're working with those first 5 stores, we'll look to identify, as the Minister announced, the 500 other stores that police want to work with. That process will take several weeks or so to identify those, and then we'll look to make contact with those stores as and when we can.
For those small stores that already have bollards and smoke machines, how does this announcement reassure them that they're being looked after here?
So that's the beauty of this announcement. It's wide enough to cover a multiple range of different options. Bollards are not the be-all and end-all, and in fact, a lot of occasions we can't actually install bollards into footpaths because of the infrastructure that's actually underneath them. So we need to look at other options like planter boxes and concrete bollards, concrete boxes and concrete other options as well that can help there. We will need to look at each individual case as a bespoke option. If they've already got a fog cannon, then we can install things like a strobe light or a sound bar that emits a really high-pitched sound that makes it uncomfortable. We can have a full SIP-set approach, full crime prevention through environmental design, look at lowering shelf height so we can see through the store, removing things from the front windows so you can see into the stores. So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach, that's for sure.
Minister, you said that your role as Police Minister is to ensure that police have all the right resources in order to deal with these sort of things. Why has policy not been looked at as something that might need to change to ensure that they're able to actually crack down on these crimes?
So I didn't catch the last policy.
Why has policy not been looked at as something that could change to help police be able to actually crack down further on youth crime?
That's incorrect. Policy has been developed. Part of the package that we announced was $94 million to look at gang harm, but to keep young people out of criminal activity in the first place, alongside of the work that the Social Wellbeing Board is doing to support whānau, to keep our kids out of criminal activity in the first place. So there are pieces of work happening alongside this.
Logistically, how do businesses apply for help and support? Do they call the police, they approach the government? how does this actually work?
So we've had experience with other operations like this, such as the fog cannon operation, and we've found the best way is that the police actually select those individual businesses through a criteria around previous victimisations and vulnerability. So rather than them applying, we will make the approach to them.
So it's more kind of responsive. So if a business gets hit, then the police will help support them. It's not a preemptive measure.
That's one of the measures, yes.
A number of businesses, when they get hit, they say that the more measures they have in place for security just means more damages, and really the thing that they want to focus on is the consequences for those who are perpetrating those crimes.
That's exactly right.
What, if you can specify what things are being done in that space, and also what's being done to tell business owners that there is really accuracy?
So I point to Operation Prior, which has made over 150 arrests. There are 750 charges in train at the moment. So arrests are being made.
For young offenders, because obviously we're seeing quite young offenders with their training.
Yes, if you want to have a look at the details of Operation Prior, yes, that is the case.
Minister, we just heard Mr Harvard say that this crime has got more organised, it's happening more, it's more violent. What's been happening in the war?
Well, $562 million to support the police. What we have been doing as a government is rebuilding the police. More numbers, more resources, better training to ensure that they can be as responsive as they need to be. And the ability to use the proceeds of crime for this particular issue has been one of the ways that we've been able to respond.
Quick question for Greg, just in terms of this announcement, do you feel like retailers are going to be satisfied with this as a response to the issues that we've been seeing?
Look, I think this is a good, solid announcement today. Obviously, there's always more that can be done, and it is a bit of an iterative process. I think we've seen the establishment of the National Retail Investigation Support Unit over the last few months. That's something we've been campaigning for since 2016, so it's taken a long time. But it's great news that it's in action. It's great news that it's out there. It's making arrests. Some of the larger retailers certainly are looking at what they're doing to help combat these crime issues directly. There are some massive investments going in from some of those businesses in terms of hardening up their infrastructure to help defend themselves against the criminal activity. But ultimately, I think everyone in the retail sector is really keen to see a conversation nationally about what we can do to actually stop these situations happening in the first place, looking at the causes of that.
Greg, do you have an expectation that $6 million will be added to if necessary?
Look, that's not a conversation I've had with the Minister yet, but obviously I think if there is a need for more funding, that's certainly something we want to talk to the Minister
How
about.
far does $6 million go? Like, how many shops can get this installed?
Well, we're looking at initial flush of 500 stores to be
About
small.
$12,000 per...
Well, and remember, there will be a range of measures. So some will have, alarms, perhaps, or some may have fog cannons. There'll be a range of measures depending on what the needs of the retailer are.
We were talking a bit about consent and how it's a bit hard for bollards in some places because council consent is needed.
Yeah.
Any conversations about getting that red tape?
Well, I know that Auckland City, for example, are doing a piece of work in that regard, and part of the beauty of having the support unit is those conversations will be happening alongside with Retail NZ, will be happening with local authorities about what can be installed.
How long does the $6 million last for?
Well, it'll last for about 500 retail outlets.
So when that goes, what happens?
Well, hopefully we will have conversations with retail stores and they will be happy with the work that's happening. You may know that with fog cannons we started with an initial flush. But those conversations, I'm not going to commit the government to future funding, but I'm, if it makes sense, that may be something that we look at continuing, because in terms of an intervention, it's relatively inexpensive and it's a great way to partner with, police to partner with business.
Can I just go back to what Kerry was saying? How do retailers apply? Do they have to get robbed first before they can get these measures put in place?
Well, it's similar to what happened around fog cannons. The eligibility criteria will be similar to that, and retailers understand that mechanism. And it really will be the police to decide who they choose to partner with. And they will look at their vulnerability as well as what might have happened in the past.
So there could be a lot of retailers that miss out on this because they don't meet the criteria.
We know from experience that these retailers that are unfortunately victims of crime are usually repeat victims of crime. So, focusing on those initial retailers first just makes sense because there's obviously a reason as to why they were initially targeted. So they make a good place to start, that's for sure.
What about the retailers that want to put preventative measures in before they get targeted, before they get ram raided and have all of their shops destroyed? Is there any options for them?
Well, as Matt has said, if they have been previously, there may have been burglaries, for example, they may have been targeted in that way. That'll be. We were looking at 500, this is a significant announcement, and we want to support the most vulnerable of our retailers. That's a good place for us to start.
Can I just add to that though, Minister? There are a lot of things that retailers can already be doing. There's a lot of tools and resources already available through organisations like Retailers to help them harden up their premises and do a better job. So there is already some support there available, driven by the sector.
How many small retailers have been attacked over the last year or so? I'm just trying to get last 500 retailers.
Yes.
How
particularly with ram raids, there have been, in the past, didn't happen very, very often, but we know that there have been about 40 a month over the last few months. So it's definitely something that is spiking, and, that's why we've come to the party with a package to support retailers.